Hello, this is Todd Hubbs, agricultural economist at the University of Illinois. Today I'm discussing my weekly outlook for March 18th, 2019, spring acreage in focus. On March 29th we got the March Prospective Planting reports coming out. The decision on acreages this year has been a tough one. All the uncertainty surrounding the trade deal and all the weather issues throughout the Corn Belt, I think, have put a little bit more uncertainty than normal in the spring acreage conditions. And today I'm going to talk about where we might see them headed and some expectations for the March 29th Prospective Plantings report. When we're thinking about the kind of acreage we'll see this spring, I like to start with just how many acres are out there available to be planted. What you're seeing here is principal crop acreage, CRP acreage, and prevent plant from 2010 to 2018. As you can see, over the last 3 years, when you add them all together, we've been between about 345 and 346.5 million acres, with principal crop acreage between 318 and 319.6. I think when we think about how this is going to go this year, I think principal crop acreage may be around in that range, depending on how the acreage allotment breaks out. Where we won't see acreage go is the CRP. The January enrollment report put CRP acreage at 22.4 million acres, which is down from last year's 23.5. So don't expect acreage to go into CRP this year, and that may have implications next year as we continue to have issues with CRP enrollment. One of the places where I think we could see some acreage go is prevent plant. Last year we did a little below 1.9 million acres of prevent plant. That's historically low when you look over the last few years. We have had a year like 2012 when we were below that, but with the kind of flooding we're seeing in large parts of the Corn Belt and the wet weather, the snowpack we're seeing out in the northern plains, I think the idea that prevent plant could be pretty high, or at least higher than what we saw last year, more along the average kind of prevent plant acreage, I think that's a decent assumption to make. So when we think about 2019 acreage, if we're going to see corn and soybean acreage in total get some of their acreage removed, we're starting to look at maybe cotton, spring and durum wheat kind of acreage, and some of these other crops when we think about the overall allotment in 2019. When we go crop by crop since 2010, which is what this graph's showing, you can see how corn and soybean acres are way above the other principal crop acres. Two of the big competitors this year for corn and soybean acres, and what it's been talked a lot about, is spring wheat acreage and cotton acreage. The winter wheat seedings report came in at 31.3 million acres. USDA has wheat acreage in total about 47, so that implies about 15.7 million acres for spring wheat and durum wheat. I think that's doable. We're thinking about spring wheat above the 13.2 million acres planted last year, and maybe a little less durum wheat when it's all said and done. The weather out in the upper plains is going to have a lot to say about that. We could also see some abandoned winter wheat acreage, a lot of wet conditions in the southern plains, but right now I think the crop looks pretty good, so we'll see how that turns out as we move through the spring. The other places in cotton, USDA has cotton acreage at 14.25 million acres. The National Cotton Council did a survey. They have it about 14.45 million acres. And when you dig into the survey a little bit, it looks like cotton's going to replace soybeans in the Mid-South. But when you look over to the Southeast, it sounds like more corn acres are going to go in rather than cotton replacing them. So we could see some cotton acres taking the place of soybean acres in the Mid-South, a little more corn acres in the Southeast. And I know we don't think about those acres much here in the Corn Belt, but they do add up over time. Overall, I think we're going to probably see principal crop acres in about the range we normally see them in. So, if we're going to get more corn acres, less soybean acres, more cotton acres, more wheat acres, some of these other little crops are going to take up the rest of the principal crop distribution. So we'll see how it goes as we move through the spring, but weather is going to be key Right now, I've got corn acres at about 91.8 million acres and soybean acres at 85.7 million acres. And that's in the range with what a lot of industry observers are putting out there for those two acreages this year. Corn acreage in particular, there's been a lot of speculation around maybe we'll lose 2 million acres of that off USDA's 92 million acre estimate. I'll have to see that to believe it. I wouldn't mind seeing some fewer corn acres with the wet weather, fieldwork issues, fertilizer prices. I think some of that's being built into the price. So we're going to have to see a pretty good deviation from expectations on corn and soybean acres to maybe get a large price move around the March 29th Prospective Plantings report. So the March 29th Prospective Plantings report is going to give us our first indication of production possibilities for spring crops in 2019. It's really going to come down to yield and all probably. If we lose a few million acres here and there, it might help prices for corn. If we gain some for soybeans, it might suppress a little bit. And always the trade deal is hanging out over all the prices. But it's going to come down to yield and summer weather when we think about production as a whole. I'd like to point out there's going to be a webinar on March 29th discussing the March Prospective Plantings report and the March 1st Grain Stocks report. Myself and Scott Irwin, we do this every year. It's free. It's from 2 to 3 p.m. and you can register at farmdoc.illinois.edu. We answer as many questions as we can. If you register for the seminar, you could submit them. So if you're interested, go out to www.farmdoc.illinois.edu and sign up for the webinar. I hope to see you there. As always, you can find my weekly outlook and daily analysis of issues related to Corn Belt farm economics at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu. I look forward to seeing you around the state of Illinois.